Hello everybody, it's me, Groucho Marx. We had an amazing night at the Groucho Club on the 29th of October 2023. Here is a short video clip of our first esteemed speaker, Vinita Ramtri, talking about the triangulation of risk. See you at the bar.
Can I first introduce Vinita Ramtri? Welcome to the stage.
So thank you so much, everyone, and thanks, Lee, for the overview. And as Lee mentioned, I'm going to be talking about triangulation of business, risk, and technology. Overall, you're getting served your food, so please don't feel compelled to only be listening. Feel free to start eating. I understand a lot of you might have come from work and you might be hungry as well. I'll start with giving you a little bit of an overview as to who I am and a bit of the background. And then I will spend some time just giving you my views on this entire triangulation and where my views stem from. Because it's not just about, okay, here's something I've read, but it's something I've lived and breathed. So a bit about me, I have worked in 4 industries this far. So I start, by ethnicity, I guess you guessed that I am Indian. I started my career in India at the hotel industry, at the OpRes hotels, after which I came to a leadership and development role in a firm called WNS, which is a business process outsourcing firm. So I did a lot of BPO work with Scottish Gas and other firms. Following that, I joined Sky TV. So I helped with the launch of Sky Go, Sky Wi-Fi when they acquired the cloud and things like that. And then I joined financial services. I worked with Barclays as head of conduct for Barclays Wealth. And then also did a lot of work on controls automation. So if you see the background, a lot of conduct controls, also a lot of process excellence work, so more end-to-end as well. And eventually then I moved to HSBC, where HSBC launched HSBC Kinetic, which is a small business banking app during COVID, and I was head of risk for Kinetic. So again, I was in the risk team, in that sense I was heading risk, but I was sitting with first line, sitting as part of business to help herd risk along, make sure we can land safely, alpha, beta, launch, FCA, PRA, whatever, open banking, every single requirement had to be met before we could go to market in the middle of bounce back loans and everything else. So the entire sort of context there. And after that, I went on to still do other work with HSBC, which is not risk related, but global head of API standards and governance. So that is more technology, again, if you see, but tech as well over there has standards and governance, because what are the standards they're following, how do we make sure they're not redundant, they're not duplicate, So I always have found in everything that I've done that you can't just say this is a risk conversation, or you can't say this is a business conversation, because everyone's hurting. If anyone's just, everyone's going around saying, oh, I need to launch this and I need to make these, APIs, and, there are payment APIs floating around in every single country, everyone's making their own to different standards, and you've suddenly got this whole, stack of things which nobody knows, they're on multiple platforms, no one's got a count. So a lot of things where you could say, oh, that's a risk issue or that's a compliance issue. Well, it's not, it's a business issue. And even if it's a tech issue, business is paying for it in that sense, right? So it's the same firm. And I'll take you back to a story actually, before I go into the real sort of topic as well, is once, in my home, I live in a flat, I live in Greenwich, single parent, 2 kids, and once, my kid's trying to get out of the bathroom and the latch broke. So I'm just, digressing completely, but the latch broke. And then, so this kid's locked inside the toilet, and then, say, Mom, I can't get out. And I say, oh, okay, and I say, okay, hold on. And I try to see, okay, maybe there's an insurance way out because I'm fully insured. Surely there must be someone I need to phone up because, I can't just tell a husband or whatever saying, figure it out. And I go, okay, mybuilder.com, well, they won't send someone right away. So where am I going to go? And I phoned my insurance company and I said, well, do you have any emergency cover? And they said, well, yeah, but this is not an emergency. Your kid can stay in the bathroom, do they have water? Do they have water? Is there a risk of life? Or is there a threat to their life? And I said, no, not really. So they said, well, we don't class it as an emergency. I said, oh, okay, fine then. And then I called another, bank that provides insurance, and I said, I'm insured with you, my flat's insured with you. They said, yeah, but we have content cover. That's not content. So I said, what do you mean? You know, they said if you flip your house upside down, which we know, you know, so the door is not going to fall off. So, you know, it's not content. And I said, okay, so that's not building, you know, that's not content cover. Then I called the building, you know, the building maintenance. And she said, but that's not part of the core, you know, is it a part of the wall? And I said, no, but it's the door. And then all of them basically just refused. And I had to call someone, you know, someone who does keys or whatever, and to come and sort this whole thing out. So back to my point of, you know, risk and compliance and business and technology, it's like everyone says, okay, my boundary stops here. I'm only responsible for the APIs. I'm not responsible for the product that's being sold through the APIs. I'm not responsible for the risk or the data that the API is carrying, because that is the data person's job. And you're so like in the middle of all this, you're just like, okay, who on earth is going to sign this thing off? And business is just like every day you want more money to introduce better tech stack, but you know, where's my ROI coming from? But risk doesn't care about ROI. As we were talking, you know, sometimes we can have, okay, saying, well, I only understand the risk part to keep the bank safe. But if there's no product, there's no customer, what are you going to do with all that safety? You know, so it's ultimately the entire thing sort of entwined. So I'll come back now to where I am now. I left HSBC last year to go to Singapore because post-COVID, I just felt like I wanted to take my kid to a completely new place. Because, you know, in COVID, we've been at home all the time and you feel you're not doing fair to the kids. They haven't seen much. So I left HSBC. I joined a consultancy called Delta Capita. I was their CEO for APAC for the last year. And then my son completely does not like Singapore, sadly. And I resigned from DC and I came back to London and I start a new role with a bank that I can't yet name, but I start on the 6th of November. And I'll be looking after conduct and controls. But in APAC, I was doing CEO role. So I can kind of look at it from every dimension to say, well, if you're a CEO and, you know, you've got a risk, you've got an issue, you're not going to say, well, send it off to the risk person. You know, you're going to say, well, okay, this is my brand getting impacted in Singapore and I'm the one who's at, you know, the coalface. And I'm not going to say, well, you know, just talk to my head of risk or whatever. But in smaller organizations, you understand that better and you appreciate that better. But the larger we get, the more complex it gets. So going back to probably the few key points that I want to say where organizations such as the larger firms, you know, financial services, again, coming from that entire sort of, you know, going around all of these departments. The first thing is the strategy, because often you have like risk has its own strategy. Open banking has its own strategy. AI will have its own innovation department, which will have its own strategy, you know. So the other day, I'm also an exec coach, by the way. And I was coaching a person and she says, I have to make my payment strategy. And I said, have you spoken to the payment product team? She said, no. We're the strategy team. We don't talk to the existing products. You know what I mean? So that's where the problem arises. And I said, well, what about the AI team? Maybe they're thinking, you know, AI-enabled products, payment products. She said, but we don't know. We don't talk to them. You know, we've been just told to come up with a commercial proposition for this. So you have every single area probably thinking, oh, payments is a buzzword, yeah? Trillions to be made, everyone loves talking payments, but you know, every area is making their own little strategies in their pockets. And you probably, when you bring all of those together, so any of the consulting firms, if you just say, you know, bring me all the payment strategies, yeah? Bring me all the payment strategies in this bank and let's put it on one table and see, are they even talking to each other? And you'll find where the gaps are. You know, you just, it's right there, you can see it. And then you ask the risk team and they'll probably say, well, we're against all the innovation anyway. So, you know, you've got gaps there. So the first part is the strategy, saying where is the firm trying to go? This is not about where the risk team wants to go, or where innovation wants to go, where tech wants to go. It's about, okay, what is this bank or this whatever organization going to be 3 years later? I think Sky did it exceptionally well. Like with Sky, we had proper saying, okay, like Sky Broadband. Some simple example. Sky Broadband, how many postcodes do we want to unbundle? You know, we want to have fiber, embedded, whatever. You had the whole map. You had the whole map in one place to say, okay, these are the postcodes we're going after. There was no different department making different postcodes. It was a payment team which said, I am the broadband product head. I will decide. I will decide which postcodes we're going after, and that's it. So you know you've spoken to the payment head. Nobody else can move anything, innovation, whoever, they have to talk to the broadband person. You know, so you have a very single sort of, maybe you can call it assembly or whatever, but it's a very singular line of command where not everyone's messing about with this. So one way it can be a blocker, but if you have the right person, it can be an enabler. The other thing probably is, once there's a strategy, and then everyone's got a single sort of aim to go for. And then within that, everyone can have different ways to achieve that. So risk might say, okay, I'm going to have, whatever, controls framework, risk framework, but in 5 years, I'm going to meet you there and I'm going to get there. And someone else might say, I'm going to do a sprint every 2 weeks, a sprint every 6 weeks. I don't care, so long as we get that outcome, right? So ultimately, not everyone can have their own maps and then say, well, actually, I've only budgeted for 2 releases, but you've budgeted for, 50 product features, and that the 2 lists don't even match. You can't do it, So ultimately, we are fighting about who will get priority in that release, because the overall map has got a gap. It's like saying we're going to get 50,000 people or 70,000 people into Emirates Arena, but Emirates only got 50,000 seats. So, what are you talking about? Like, it's common sense, but because we don't see it as we see it in a stadium, so I'm going to get 11 players, but actually we only signed up 7. So how are you going to get 11? So simple things like that, which are just fundamental gaps because you can't see between departments. And so I'd say the other part is just saying there's a single strategy, everyone's working their separate plans, but to the same single strategy, and then everyone's thinking long term. Because there's another part about CEOs' lifespans, and I think over the years, you had the Jack Welch's who started with G and finished with G's, but now you're talking more, 2.5 years or 3 years is your average CEO lifespan. So everyone's thinking, as they say, like with election, there's a manifesto, but what is the job of the person who's elected? It's not to deliver on that, but to make sure he gets voted again, like to get re-elected, So a lot of the thinking is more about, okay, how do I make sure that, as long as I'm there, then this thing happens, but after I'm there, and that's the big reason why sustainability sort of suffers, right? Because you're planting trees, as they say, the shade of which you're never going to see. And everyone's only thinking next bonus, next results. And therefore, you just aren't going to get that long lens vision. So there are a lot of structural issues, I would say, in a lot of these, which are related to just how we've configured the entire ecosystem. Finally, just one part where I'll leave you with this is I'm separately doing a book on lean, and I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. So I also think sort of lean in the way I operate. But when you see the first, second, third line of defense model, and just look up the 5 principles of lean, like begin with the customer, value add activities, create flow, you will see the gaps. You will just see the gaps. There is no end-to-end thinking in the first, second, third line of defense. It's like, please, can you go fight with each other so that we can waste company time? And, so because it looks like more meetings, right? You've got more meetings, you've got more risk committees, you've got everything. But the purpose of these committees is not to achieve the outcome. It is to check and challenge, to advise, check and challenge. I mean, I've been in so many conversations from a business standpoint with risk to say, hey, can you give me some opinion on this? Well, my job is not to help you. My job is to advise, check and challenge. It's your job to figure out what you should do. And I was like, what the hell? Are we working for the same firm or what? So the point is just how we set these things out. So what might seem efficient, saying here's a perfect risk team, here's a perfect business team, a perfect tech team, structurally it is so flawed that you can't get a perfect outcome with that. Because if everyone does their jobs, we will be fighting all the time. We'll just be saying, I blocked you today, I found a gap, but I'm not going to give you the solution. So, it's just, we need to just rethink the entire format. And I think lean is a great start to just say, okay, how do you create that flow? How do you make it my job to say, okay, kick the tires on my thinking, go for it, but then also tell me how to fix it. Don't just tell me, oh, there's a problem, but then you can't fix it. And I had that in one of the pieces I was launching, and I had the legal team. I don't want to name the legal firm, but they would come every day and check my app and say there are gaps in the app. And I said, well, how do I fix the gaps? Oh, that's not my job. And then I said, okay, then I'll find a legal team whose job it is to actually tell me how to fix the gaps. And they had to start doing it. Because the point is, you can't just keep telling me this is not meeting this requirement, that's not meeting that requirement, but you go figure because you're the business. And I said, what are you here for? I'm here to find the gaps. And I said, sorry, but the mandate is not correct. Something is missing in this mandate. So we really need to think as risk people. And one of the key evidences would be, I don't know, Lee, you probably have everyone's titles here, is that if there are more risk titled people in this room, we already know there's a gap. I mean, why is the CEO not here? Why is the CEO not here? Because they don't think it is their job. that's, you already answered, you know, where the gap is, right? So on that note, I will let you enjoy your food. Thank you.